So my last Call of Duty video wasn't exactly beloved. If you haven't seen it, by the way, go give it a watch. So of course, we're going to do another one. Let's talk about the problem with Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. Let's get right into it, guys. And remember to subscribe if you enjoy this sort of content. So this video is essentially just a slightly deeper dive into the problem with Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, as opposed to my video last week, which was a bit more of a light-hearted one. This video will really be digging into what the core issues of this game are, and why I really think that it isn't worth the premium $70 price tag. So let's get right into it. My first issue with why Modern Warfare 3 isn't worth the price is the importance of the correlation between new content and price. And I think that any game that places itself in the premium price tier of $70 or above, they come under a higher scrutiny than any game that's below that. And I don't just mean that in the way that if a game rehashes old content for a remake's purpose, that it instantly isn't worth $70. I don't believe this at all. Look at the recent massively acclaimed Resident Evil 4 remake. That was essentially just a straight remake of an old game, and yet it has amazing reviews and nobody's arguing that that was not worth the price tag. But that's because rather than just bringing the old content to a new era with slightly better graphics, which I would argue is a remaster, it completely reworked the original game and all of its systems and brought that game into a modern age in a way that's more of a reimagining of how the game would look if it was made today, as opposed to just remaking and remastering the graphics and bringing it kicking and screaming in today's environment, where it probably wouldn't be as well received as the newer remake has. Modern Warfare 3 is certainly a remaster as opposed to a remake, in the multiplayer sake anyway, because obviously I can't test the campaign with it not being released for another few weeks. The issues with the multiplayer is it only uses old maps, and that comes with several problems that many people aren't acknowledging on social media right now. Let me break them down for you. One thing I want to clear up really quickly is I have no issue with using some old maps in Call of Duty games. I think that the perfect blend that any Call of Duty game would strive for is a fairly equal blend of the new and the old, because that means that you both have the nostalgia of the old maps as well as the new advancements of the Call of Duty formula that the new maps will show. Take an example, Modern Warfare 2 last year. That game brought back several old maps, some of which were remastered and some of which were remade, but it also had its own fair share of completely new maps. And I would argue that most of those new maps, apart from a couple of obvious ones, were actually really well designed for the most part. And that's because they not only brought advancements such as swimming to the Call of Duty formula, but they also provided an incredible mix of long-range combat and choke points, and that made the gameplay really varied and suitable for anyone. The issues with using only older maps is they won't show these advancements or that mix of gameplay because they just weren't designed that way. But you also have problems such as camping really coming back into focus. And that's because the newer Call of Duty maps have had years of experience of players complaining about camping involved in their making, and therefore they're designed to not satisfy players who want to camp. Because obviously camping completely ruins the state of gameplay in Call of Duty and completely ruins the fluidity of how matches work. Camping in older maps is a huge problem, especially in maps such as Rust, because if you look at players camping underneath the big building in the middle, that's become a genuine problem that I've experienced a lot, because the new generation of Call of Duty players haven't experienced maps where it's possible to do this to a degree that it is in the older maps, and therefore camping I can see is going to be something that's going to be a massive issue with Modern Warfare 3. You've also got issues such as that the old maps only use dull colours, in the most part anyway, because there is one map out of the beta selection that is an outlier to this, but all the other maps use very dull, muddy colours. And that's not really their fault, that's just because due to the old console limitations that the maps were originally made on, it basically meant that the old developers couldn't utilise the colour spectrum that we have today, and they had to dull down the map so they could be played on the Xbox 360. that means that the games don't translate well to, especially if you compare it to any new Call of Duty maps that have been made recently. The old maps just don't quite compare graphically, just because they just look plain. That does not mean they're bad, but I'm just listing problems only using older maps, and that means that you're really only going to get exactly the same mix of boring, muddy colours that we use on the original maps. The other issue that I haven't really seen anyone acknowledge for some reason is developing a new game based only on very old and very, very plain maps. Is people who've played them to death in previous games will tire of them more quickly. It is the only way it can possibly work, because those players have played those maps for years on other games. So what makes developers think that they're going to come to this game and suddenly they're going to play it for another 100 hours? If you spend 200 hours playing on these maps, you're not going to want to spend another 200-300 hours playing on exactly the same ones. That's why I think that the best place a Call of Duty game can land is having an equal mix between the old and the new, because there's just enough variety and variation there to really make the older maps stand out in their nostalgia factors. But when you just base a game on those nostalgia factors, boredom is gonna kick in at some point sooner or later. So this Modern Warfare 3 should firstly have been a great DLC that could be added onto Modern Warfare 2 that would really have enhanced the selection of maps. But it's also just not going to have the lifespan of a modern Call of Duty game, because it can't. Anyway, my next big issue with Modern Warfare 3 are the guns. Let's talk about it. So let's talk about guns, and this is something that I've seen projected on a number of social media platforms. The guns in Modern Warfare 3 do feel half-baked, and that's even after the second beta weekend brought better sliding accuracy and increased headshot damage for some guns, which I think has actually massively helped with a long time to kill, because it no longer feels like there's very little you can do in a situation when you're facing more than one player. Still, the guns feel far too accurate on a base level, not including the sliding accuracy, which was horrendous. But when you're just shooting someone from long range, the guns feel like absolute laser beams. And this is a problem, because you're not supposed to be able to do that with an SMG. Like, you're just not. The sound signatures of some guns are also incredibly difficult to differentiate, which means that almost every gun sounds very similar, so it's harder to figure out what gun somebody is using just from the sound. Because you could definitely do that in Modern Warfare 2 because the gun sound was so crisp. It just means that the gameplay lacks a punch, because the sound of guns is what makes them sound heavy and realistic. For example, look at Doom Eternal. That game is famed for how its guns sounded, because they sounded like almost, the only way to describe it really is meaty. That was how the heavy machine gun and the shotgun sounded, and it really helped with immersion, which is something that Modern Warfare 3 sorely lacks in exchange. There are also some minor glitches and unlocks and attachments here as unlocking too early, but I'm just going to put that down to the traditional beta jank of a new Call of Duty game and test it properly when full release comes around. My last issue with Modern Warfare 3 comes in its movements. Let me explain. So movement in Call of Duty is definitely something that's going to be polarising. Some players prefer their slower, tactical shooter with a much higher time to kill, and some prefer their much quicker run and gun game that is what Call of Duty always used to be. This most definitely stands on the latter side of the argument. Modern Warfare 3 might be quicker than its predecessors, but it also shows a lack of fluidity. Let me explain why that is. So my first issue is that sliding is awkward, with the stance change in the middle feeling forced and imprecise. That's been recently improved by the Beta Weekend 2 update, but it definitely does still show to just look unnatural, because the animation is very much in the middle of a slide and it just doesn't quite fit in, and it just looks awkward and just not quite what you'd want for a quick slide into another combat scenario. My other issue with it is that climbing ledges just feels bad. It feels very inaccurate, and it also feels like some ledges should be easily reachable, but aren't. And the process of climbing that ledge is slow. You're supposed to be playing as an elite operative in Modern Warfare 3, so climbing ledges really shouldn't be this awkward. It's the fact that what ledges you can and can't climb are not vaguely clearly marked. I actually think that it partially comes from the older maps just not being designed to have uses of ledging. It just felt better in Modern Warfare 2 because it is very clearly marked where you could and couldn't ledge. Overall, Modern Warfare 3, it just feels more arcadey. And that's fine if it's what you're looking for. But I think that it will really polarise some people because last year's Modern Warfare 2 was so different. It was a much slower, much heavier feeling twitch shooter that was very much tactical because the time to kill was so short. This is very much a traditional run and gun Call of Duty game, which would definitely impress some, but for me personally, I preferred last year. In my opinion, Modern Warfare 2 is the freshest feeling Call of Duty in years, and even though I think the post-launch state was very mismanaged, I think that it hit so much harder than this for me ever could. So what do you guys think of Modern Warfare 3? Most of you will probably be sinking your teeth into the second beta right now, so let me know what you think in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye bye.